So, but I mean, this connects to a larger argument of your article, which is you do show that there seems to be a contrast between the Quranic interest in Christianity and the tradition's portrayal of Mecca and Medina, for that matter, as places with no Christianity. So yeah, what are we to make of that? How should scholars approach that tension, maybe?
I mean, I think it's very interesting. Before we continue, I mean, it's important to clarify that I'm not claiming that no one in Mecca or Medina or whatever in that area, wherever in that area, had ever heard about Christianity. Maybe they did. What I'm claiming is that Christianity, as far as we know, as far as the evidence tells us, did not play any major role in the religious life of people of the Hijaz. We don't have any evidence to prove the contrary. The only possible evidence is the Quran. If we accept the assumption that the entirety of the Quran comes from the Hijaz, and this is one of the main points of my article, because there is a clear contradiction between the picture emerging from the Quran and the one which is described in the tradition. I mean, we don't need to go into the details, but just to design an outline, the tradition tells us that Muhammad had to face the opposition of some polytheist, local polytheist people and of Jews, Jewish community members in Medina. Christians are almost absent from traditional accounts on the life of Muhammad. Right. However, when we go through the Quran,
there's just, I'm sorry to jump in. I mean, someone might object and say, well, there's Bahira, there's Waraqa, there's some Christians who come from Najran. Yeah, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we should be also careful with reading these sources. Sometimes I'm not totally convinced that they are very reliable, but yeah, maybe there were Christian monks or whatever passing by.
Say something like that in the article. Like, these are figures that are somehow marginal to the actual community. They're coming from Najran. Obviously, Bahira is up in Syria. Waraqa is sort of mysteriously in Mecca, and he kind of disappears anyway from Muhammad's life after affirming the prophet or the call to prophethood. He sort of disappears. I know there are a couple of narratives about what happened to him later, but
exactly. But however, the Quran refers to stories like the one of the sleepers of Ephesus, or the one of Dhul-Qarnayn, that were popular among Christians, and that in the especially in the Syriac-speaking area. And one, I think, really struggles to see how the audience would be able to understand the very allusive Quranic language if it was not composed by people who were grown in a flourishing Christian culture. So it's not only a matter of having characters, Christian characters floating around in the background of Muhammad's life. I mean, from certain Quranic passages, we get the picture of a real flourishing Christian center. It's a bit unlikely to me that this can be.
Sorry, I just want to emphasize that point and like double down on it because I mean, I agree emphatically. I think the Quran's the suggestion the Quran offers us is that there was a flourishing Christian community, or at least there is robust engagement with Christianity. So not only do we have, Jesus, Mary, John the Baptist appearing in the Quran, but we have references to monks, to ruhban, to priests. I mean, it's a debated term, but qassisin. We have references to sawame and bi'a, so maybe monastic cells in churches. There might be, I mean, it's a little bit debated, but allusions to elements of Christian liturgy in the Quran. And then, like you said, I mean, the narratives, these are thoroughly Christian narratives. You alluded to the sleepers of Ephesus story, also that is known in the Quran as the companions of the cave account, and the miracle stories about Jesus. I mean, there's just like, there's this robust engagement with Christianity, which is almost shocking if you think that the background was simply this either pagan city of Mecca or this Jewish city of Medina.
Exactly. And we have another, and then we have also another, if you want, contradiction between Quran and tradition when it comes to the question, the description of the mushrikun in the Quran and in the tradition. And this is another question that has been extensively investigated, debated in the past few years. So if you want, the case of Christianity and the case of the representation of the mushrikun are two parallel cases in which we can really see this inconsistency between Quran and tradition emerging.
Can I just
sure.
add to that a little bit? So mushrikun, for people who don't know the term, means something like the associators. So, you know, it comes from ashraka, basically, which means to associate something with something else. And it's an accusation the Quran makes of certain opponents that they associate things, in this case, just following the traditional idea, goddesses or gods with the true God, Allah. But I mean, I think your point is that a careful reading of the Quran might show that the mushrikun weren't just like polytheistic idolaters, that it's more nuanced or something.
That's how the Quran seems to represent these mushrikun in several passages, okay? But I think that the issue is a bit more complicated, and it is related also to that of the possible textual stratification of the Quran. So that's it's in the article I make the case that at least some parts of the Quran, which I consider to be the oldest, first of all, do not use the term mushrikun. And they don't even use the verb related to the root. They don't talk about associating. They just talk against some opponents. But from this, how to say, corpus of text within the Quran, this Quran within the Quran, we can find an image, a representation of these opponents of the Quran's prophet that actually matches the representation of the mushrikun in the tradition. So it's a really, I think, a bit more complicated, the question, and it's related also to how we use the Quran. That is, when we try to write history and when we try to extrapolate elements from the Quran to reconstruct the religious and social background of the text. So I think that the very important notion that we need to keep in mind is that of, as I mentioned, textual stratification, and that the text may contain different layers. And we should keep in mind that not every layer might refer to the context described in the tradition. Otherwise said, there might be passages in the Quran, entire pericopes, even entire surahs, if you want, that do not come from this area between Mecca and Medina.
Okay.
They might come from a different context.
Yeah, so this might be, to some of our viewers, might be like completely new, this idea of stratification. I mean, even to people maybe trained in Quranic studies, students doing Islamic studies or something like that. I mean, we just hear the sort of the standard, let's call it the master narrative, both from the tradition and from, you know, Western Orientalists, is that yeah, there are elements of the Quran from different periods of Muhammad's life, but we can't speak of stratification in the sense of a text that is the product of an editing process where material of different origin was redacted together, right?
Yes.